Hello and welcome to Lecture 2 in the Inform Africa Toolathon series. In this session, we'll introduce big data sources used to analyze human mobility patterns, focusing on how large-scale, passively collected data helps us understand movement behaviors in real-world settings. This lecture is part of the Inform Africa project, supported by the NIH-funded DSI Africa initiative, which connects researchers across transportation engineering and public health. I'm Dr. Xin Wu, joined by Dr. Chenfeng Xiong from Villanova University. Together, we'll explore how mobile device data and analytical frameworks help us uncover mobility dynamics during epidemics. Let's begin with the key data source, location-based service, LBS data. These are passively collected records from mobile devices such as smartphones and GPS systems. Each location sighting includes an anonymized ID, latitude and longitude, a timestamp, and positioning accuracy. By tracking these data points over time, we can reconstruct individual-level mobility patterns, forming the foundation for large-scale behavioral analysis. Here, we see an example of mobile device datasets used in human mobility research. These datasets capture how people move throughout a city or region, offering millions of data points every day. When aggregated, they reveal population flow, density hotspots, and activity clusters, which are crucial for understanding mobility changes under public health interventions. The figure on the right shows a density plot of 14 days of human activities in South Africa derived from smartphone data. Each bright area corresponds to higher population activity, while darker regions show lower movement. By visualizing mobility in this way, we can quickly detect behavioral differences. For example, reduced movement during lockdowns or increased concentration in urban centers. The Villanova Mobility Lab collaborates globally to collect and analyze human mobility data. Our datasets cover multiple continents, including Africa, North America, and Asia. This global coverage allows us to compare mobility trends across countries, evaluate how movement restrictions work in different regions, and develop scalable, transferable models for epidemic response. Let us explain the analytical framework for measuring human mobility using passively collected smartphone location data. We start on the left with the raw sighting data, which record the time and location of each mobile device, essentially showing where and when people move. Next, during data pre-processing, we clean and filter these records, identify each person's home and workplace, and remove duplicate signals to ensure data quality. Then comes mobility identification, where we detect tours and trips and calculate trip distances. From these, we can compute key mobility indicators such as daily trips per person, daily miles traveled, and other behavioral metrics. Finally, these processed measures are applied at a regional scale, as shown here for Nigeria, to help understand movement dynamics and their implications for transportation planning and public health analysis. Then we show how we can identify trips and tours from raw LBS data. On the left, each colored symbol represents a separate trip. You can see 4 unlinked movements between different origins and destinations. Here, each trip is treated as an individual event without considering its relationship to the others. On the right, we link those same movements together into a single home-to-work tour. By connecting sequential trips into a continuous chain, we can better understand a person's daily travel behavior, including where they start, where they go, and how these activities are connected. Then, how raw smartphone location data are transformed into meaningful mobility patterns and how these patterns relate to epidemic development. On the left, we see a space-time diagram. Each dot represents a location sighting, and by connecting these points, we can identify trips and activities. For example, when movement starts, it marks the beginning of a trip, and when the device remains stationary, it indicates an activity stop. This process allows us to separate individual trips, calculate travel distances, and reconstruct daily movement behaviors. On the right, the chart compares daily inflows between reopened and lockdown counties during COVID-19. We can clearly see that mobility decreased sharply during lockdowns and gradually increased after reopening. From LBS data, we can generate 2 key open data sets that serve different research purposes. The first is aggregated trip data. This dataset summarizes the total number of trips between geographic zones, such as local government areas or states, over a specific time period. It doesn't include individual trajectories. Instead, it captures overall movement patterns between regions, much like an origin-destination matrix commonly used in transportation planning. The second is trip raster data. This contains anonymized person-level travel records, each with a time-stamped sequence of locations for one traveler. It allows us to reconstruct complete travel trajectories while still protecting user privacy. Together, these two datasets offer both macro-level and micro-level perspectives on mobility, providing valuable insights for transportation modeling and epidemic analysis. This slide briefly introduced the four-step method in traditional transportation planning, which remains a fundamental framework for understanding mobility data. The process begins with trip generation, estimating how many trips originate from or end in each zone based on factors like household size, income, employment type, and vehicle ownership. Next is trip distribution, which determines where those trips go, often modeled using origin-destination (OD) matrices that can now be estimated with LBS data. The third step is mode choice, where we identify which mode travelers use: car, bus, train, depending on income, travel time, parking cost, and other factors. Finally, highway and transit assignment allocates these trips to specific routes within the network, followed by evaluating performance measures like congestion or travel delay. The figures on the right show real-world examples, auto OD volumes between Baltimore and Philadelphia, and a traffic assignment map in the DC, Maryland, Virginia metropolitan area, illustrating how these models translate into spatial mobility insights. This slide introduces the tour-based or activity-based modeling approach, a more behaviorally realistic way to represent how people travel. In this framework, a trip represents movement from one location to another, for example, from home to work or from work to a store. But a tour goes one step further. It links multiple trips together into a full travel chain that starts and ends at the same place, typically home. On the left, you can see an example of a home-work-shop-home pattern. The traveler first leaves home for work, then stops at a supermarket after work, and finally returns home. That sequence, 3 trips in total, forms one complete tour. Tour-based models or activity-based model capture not only where people go, but also why and when they travel, providing a much more comprehensive understanding of daily mobility behavior. Furthermore, we give a detailed example of a tour-based or activity-based model showing how a person's daily activities and trips are connected over time. Here we see a full daily schedule on January 6, 2020, a weekday sunny and typical workday. The traveler starts the day with home activity, then drives 15 miles to work, stays until late morning, walks to eat out for lunch, and then walks back to work for the afternoon session. After work, the person drives to pick up a child from school, goes home briefly, then drives again to go shopping, and finally returns home for evening activities. Each arrow represents a trip, and each icon represents an activity location such as work, school, or shop. Together, these trips form one continuous daily tour, illustrating not only movement patterns but also the purpose and timing behind each trip. Such tour-based data linked with points of interest and multimodal transportation networks help us understand real-world human mobility in a much richer and behaviorally meaningful way. Let us compare activity proportions derived from LBS data with those from traditional household travel surveys in the United States. We can see that for most of the 9 activity categories, especially in dense data samples, the results closely match the survey outcomes. This indicates that passively collected LBS data can accurately represent real-world travel and activity patterns. Then we compare the hourly activity patterns from LBS data with traditional household surveys. We can see that activities like home activity and work for pay align closely across all datasets, especially in the dense data sample, which fits the survey results best. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Please visit our website at inform-africa.org and feel free to contact us by email. See you in next video.